I stood at the edge of the cliff, where the wind howled like it remembered something I didn't. The old radio in my hand, long dead for years, suddenly crackled to life. A static hum, a faint voice. Then it said my name. No one else was around. Just me and the jungle staring back, as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. Back home, I looked into my cracked mirror and noticed something odd paper stuck behind it. I pulled it out, brushing off dust and cobwebs. A map, hand-drawn, brittle. It showed a location deep in the jungle labeled only Signal Tower. I've never seen this before, but it had my initials on the corner. Someone knew I'd find it. Someone wanted me to follow. The jungle was quiet, not peaceful wrong. Even the birds wouldn't sing. Each step I took, it felt like I was sinking into the earth's breath. The trees closed in. The canopy blacked out the sun. Every few meters, I thought I heard my own footsteps echoing. But I was alone. At least, I should have been. There it was, twisted metal and rotting beams rising from the center of nowhere. The signal tower stood like a monument to forgotten pain. Vines wrapped its skeleton like veins feeding something rotten. A red light blinked at the top, not rhythmically, but as if it had a pulse. And for a moment, I felt mine slow down to match it. It rolled in so fast, like it had been waiting for me. One moment I saw the ground, the next nothing, but I heard everything, static, then whispers. Some begged, some cried, and one called my name with a voice like mine, but older and broken. I didn't want to reply, but my lips moved. Anyway, inside, I found the main console. Dead wires, old dials, and then sound. A faint broadcast bleeding through speakers that weren't plugged in. Children's laughter, then screams, then silence so loud it throbbed in my ears. I leaned in. The static parted for a second, and a voice said, "Why did you come back?" But I'd never been here, had I? A cassette lay alone on the console. Do not play. Naturally, I did. The room filled with whispers, slow and uneven. Then my voice reading something I've never said. The monitor in front of me flickered, and in the reflection, something stood behind me. I turned fast. Nothing. But I swear, the monitor still showed it there, watching. A heavy metal door clawed, chained, rusted shut. It stared at me like it had a mouth. Then it groaned. Chains loosened on their own. Hinges screeched like they hadn't moved in decades. The door swung open. What lay beyond was darkness, thicker than any night I've ever known. It didn't want me there, but it opened for me anyway. There was a coat, perfectly still on its hanger, dusty, forgotten. As I passed by, it swayed slightly, like someone had brushed past it. I froze. The air didn't move, no wind. I reached out. The fabric was warm, like it had just been worn. Then the radio hissed again, and I realized there was a second set of footsteps in the room. The mirror on the wall reflected not my image, but another room one I wasn't in. In that space, a woman in a floral dress screamed, pounding on invisible walls. Behind her, shadows closed in. I blinked. Now the room was mine, but the woman was gone. And my reflection, it hadn't blinked with me. The old radio receiver was coated in dust, but it still worked. I turned the dial slowly. With every notch, a new voice emerged. A wartime broadcast. A child crying for her mother. A preacher calling out to empty pews. They layered overlapping into a chorus of the dead. I stopped. One voice rose above the rest. It was mine, reading a warning I'd never written. Behind the tower, the jungle opened into a clearing. There were graves crude, sunken. Some had names, some didn't, all handmade. But one had no date, Just a name scratched with a knife. Rango, my name. The dirt was fresh. The ground hadn't settled. My hands trembled as I backed away. Something was waiting to fill that grave, and I feared it was me. I tried to sleep, just for an hour. The tower creaked, the jungle howled. But it wasn't the sounds outside that woke me. It was the feeling cold breath against my neck. I turned, heart pounding, empty. But under the bed, the floor creaked. Something moved, a hand long, thin slid slowly out, and then back in. It didn't want to be seen, yet it knew I was watching. In the control room, I found a weathered notebook, the engineer's log. The entries were frantic. He wrote of voices calling his name, of sleepwalking into the basement, of hearing people who had vanished, whispering in the vents. On the last page, 3:33 a.m. is when the station chooses. Not all who hear return. Below that, a bloody fingerprint. The rest was ripped out. At nightfall, the broadcast systems flared to life. No power, no connection. But every speaker blared loud, distorted screams, sobs, chanting in a tongue I couldn't place. The air felt electric. I covered my ears, but the sound seeped through my bones. I saw figures outside the glass silhouettes watching, unmoving, waiting. The station wasn't abandoned. It had an audience. I tried to leave, walked out the back into the jungle, followed the compass 20 minutes in. I found my own footprints leading back to the station. I hadn't turned. I hadn't retraced. But I was back. I tried again. Same result. Again the same. The forest bent itself into a trap. I was walking a loop, and something was tightening it. Inside the transmitter room, a new frequency pulsed through the air low, vibrating. My vision blurred. My ears rang. I saw shadows bend in impossible ways. Then I saw myself older, decayed, trembling in the corner. Don't finish the broadcast, it begged. It feeds on closure. The hallucination faded, but the fear didn't. I wasn't alone in my own mind anymore. I sat in the studio chair, out of breath, broken. Across from me, a shadow sat down. Its eyes were hollow, but it moved like it remembered being human. I asked who it was. It didn't answer. It just placed its hand on the mic. My voice came out, my memories, my secrets. It smiled without lips. I wasn't interviewing it. It was broadcasting me. I opened a trapdoor behind the archives. Stairs led down. I counted them 10, 20, 30. I lost count. The deeper I went, the colder it got. The walls turned from brick to something soft, something that pulsed. The air smelled like old meat and burnt wires. Then I heard the whispers again, this time behind me. I wasn't going down alone. A clock on the wall spun backwards violently. Everything flickered like an old film reel. I walked out the front door and watched myself walk in again. Identical, same bag, same face. We locked eyes and he screamed, then vanished. I ran outside again. There I was again, entering. The tower had caught me, and now I was part of its cycle. The room was sealed shut. I pried it open with a crowbar, and the stench hit first like mold and rusted time. Inside, they sat at dusty desks, for skeletons in faded uniforms, headphones still tight around cracked skulls. One had a hand, frozen on a microphone, its jaw stretched wide, mouth open in a scream that never ended. On the wall behind them, they said we couldn't leave if we listened. I turned on my flashlight. The beam danced around like it had its own fear, but every time I pointed it toward the eastern wall, it flickered, died, then blinked back. I tried again, same thing. Then a shadow moved there, no body, no sound, just movement. My light refused to show it, like even the flashlight knew. Some things aren't meant to be seen. Cables began snapping from the ceiling like veins tearing loose, and from the dark corner, it emerged, a twisted figure, flesh melted with metal, its head fused with a broken transmitter. Sparks jumped where its eyes should be. It dragged, its leg behind like it forgot how to be human. And then it looked at me. It remembered. I was the next engineer. On the wall, a board of old staff photos, smiling faces from another century. I looked closer. Every minute, one photo changed, the background blurred. Then someone new appeared. Me. In the shadows, closer each time. By the 10th change, my face was in the front row, smiling. But I never posed for it. Someone or something was adding me into history. A metal vault stood in the lowest part of the station. No lock, just a speaker. I said my name out loud, nothing. I hesitated, then whispered my full name. The door clicked, opened slowly. Inside, a tape recorder played a voice I hadn't heard in years, my childhood self, laughing, crying, singing. Then it begged, please don't let me finish the broadcast. The ground in the archive room pulsed soft like breathing. Then, wet, blood began to seep upward. Defying gravity, it pooled at my feet, rising fast. Then it moved, shaping into letters. I watched in horror as it spelled, finish the broadcast. The blood disappeared as quickly as it came, but the message burned into the wood beneath it. Back in the main chamber, an ancient terminal blinked to life. Numbers scrolled, counting down from 3 minutes. The machines roared. Lights flashed. I tried shutting it down, pulling wires, smashing controls. Nothing worked. Then voices flooded the room. Some begged to stop it. Others cheered it on. I stared at the screen. 2 minutes left. I still didn't know what was being sent out. A room of glass. I entered without thinking, and the door vanished behind me. My reflection stood still, but I moved. Then the voices came, hundreds, thousands, all trapped, all screaming, all versions of me. One cried, "You never leave if you listen too long." Another screamed, "Break the mic." I covered my ears, but their agony pierced through. This was where voices came to die. The speakers across the station turned on one by one. My voice spilled out of them, terrified, whispering things I hadn't said. Yet, it's behind me. I see the grave now. Help me, please. I stood in silence, listening to my own future fall apart. It was broadcasting what would happen, and I couldn't stop it. The tower was telling my fate before I could live it. I ran through the jungle. Smoke and fire rose behind me. The tower finally collapsed, a monstrous groan of steel and ash. But in my hand the old radio still crackled. I turned it off. It turned back on. A voice whispered one final time, "We always finish the broadcast, Rango." I screamed and smashed it. But even then, in the wind, I heard it whisper again,